Now, Tempo Storm versus Superstars. We're looking to see how Tempo Storm's mentality is after they had a rough week, losing both to Gale Force Esports and No Tomorrow. Sam's mentality in his winner's interview, even on Friday versus Navintic, was humbled.
Yeah, you could definitely tell that they were kind of beating themselves up. And it's a double-edged sword. I feel like I understand that self kind of almost destructive mentality, because I feel like to truly grow, you can't be easy on yourself, right? But I also feel like it hits an edge where it's like, is this too much, too far? And in those circumstances, I tried to describe what it can feel like to kind of be lost with those answers and constantly searching for them in a team environment. And Tempo Storm does seem to be suffering from that a little bit. I feel like this week is, even if no matter how far they've deteriorated, it's not enough to be below Superstars, so they should be looking at this as a huge morale boost.
Both of these teams will be hoping that they can turn things around for part one. Let's hear from the teams themselves about this match.
When looking at Tempo Storm, I'm pretty sure the only reason why they seem weak right now is because they're not satisfied with their international performance, and they're trying a couple changes within the team. And the most noticeable one is Cattle and Fury are sometimes swapping roles and heroes. So I think that's in the effort to see if that'll help them in international play. So when we played against Roll20, we tried a few different comps, just trying to see what works for us in an HGC match. And I think we found a couple things we're comfortable on that we might try again.
Superstars is pretty similar to Naventic in the sense that no one really knows what's going on yet. I think once they lock in actual roles and who's calling and give Yoda a bigger role overall, I think, than he's had on the team, I think they'll start doing better. Still think right now they're still building up as a team. We prepare for every team the same amount. There's no reason to give any team any less respect than any other team. We should always be as prepared as possible for every match.
A lot of respect from Caterpillar toward Yoda, specifically on Superstars, saying that he should be given a bigger role for the team, and we know that he is starting to get more responsibility within the team.
Yeah, I feel like even kind of with the calls it seems like he's making, because he's initiating some of these fights for the team, and even then it just feels like you can see him suddenly, he is a leader within the group in the decision-making overall, and if he gets enough of that Tempo Storm feels like it'll have a high impact. I feel like we've already heard the members of Superstars compliment Yoda and what they've managed to learn from them so far. So I say, yeah, I agree with them. I feel like give more and more experience over to Yoda, because he is by far the most successful player overall when it comes to results, especially more recently.
Both of these teams are going through a lot of fluctuations, and the team that has been able to make the adjustments faster, be able to get more comfortable with them, will reign supreme in the series. So let's get it underway. Starting with the Battleground, we're going to Dragonshire, but it's not a Superstars pick.
Tempo Storm is going to be choosing Dragonshire.
That is Superstars' most picked map.
I know, so much so that I feel like, what? Because Tempo Storm, okay, so Dragonshire, I feel like I was going to drop this narrative and not talk about the old Dragonshire, the new, and the adjustments of the map, but now it's like so weird that they take them there, because that is one of the top maps for Superstars historically. Tempo Storm has dropped all value in Dragonshire, prioritized things like Cursed Hollow and Warhead Junction, the double boss meme that we were talking about before. And then to go, not only is this a different map, it's bringing back the old and changing different priority, but then a completely different playstyle, and then accenting your opponent's strengths. Everything about it doesn't add up. It doesn't mean I don't think that Tempo can't win this game. Like, I still feel like there's no map where Tempo should be afraid to take Superstars. It's just so surprising to see this change for them.
Yeah, why it's so surprising is it is such a sharp shift in what we know of Tempo Storm for Phase 2. Liking the double boss maps, definitely, with Cursed and Warhead, but just not playing on this. They've only played one game on Dragonshire, and they didn't even pick it. That was when they played versus Even in Death. So it's an interesting change to see for Tempo Storm, whether it's strategic on their end for Superstars, against Superstars, or if it's something to do with, you know, the fact that they're playing a little bit more of the double warrior with Fury playing the second warrior, if that is how they want to be playing, so that they have Caterpillar along with the rotations between mid-bot. It'll be a question for them, definitely, if we end up with them in the winner's interview.
Yeah, I'm trying to give me a little bit. I might have a really good point to talk about, but I need to double check my facts here. Because I'm recalling a game of how Tempo played onto the Dragonshire and how they play it, and why they might actually have chosen this map. The TLDR is, when it comes to learning to be aggressive, Dragonshire is a beautiful map to be able to, you know, when we're looking for their developments, we know Tempo is looking to grow, and they should be using any resource they can, like a series like this, to be able to get that. Again, they should be confident over a team like Superstars. So you bring it to a map where, like, Tomb should be the next, right? Where it's a little bit harder to identify those win conditions, and you can end the game as long as you never waste an opportunity. And so maybe this is Tempo Storm's force on themselves to better that and enable their strengths and grow as a group.
That would be really cool if that is what it is.
Yeah.
What they want to do is try to put some external factors besides just winning this series. If they want to use this series as an opportunity, a growth opportunity, and we know that they do, but a specific way, a specific goal of making sure that they can get that growth. Genji first pick for Superstars. We know that's been more of a favorite for Hosty.
I'm going to be honest, if I was to give like one of the first tools and resources Superstars needs to get an upset over Tempo, things like Genji, the resets, very high impact heroes are going to be ones that I think are necessary. Granted, it doesn't accent the map too heavily, and Superstars has shown really good signs on wave clear maps with teamfight compositions, but they've also had very poor responses as well. So if we get the better end of Superstars here today, I think that is the correct way to start this draft.
Yeah, the main thing is playing to the composition that they drafted. It wasn't the last series, but the series before that they played where they drafted a composition like this and then proceeded to play more like the old Superstars where they are safe, making sure that they are just not losing out, they're continuing to stay as a presence within lanes, but already in getting a Genji, they have said, we are committing to being more of an aggressive team. So just making sure that they're able to follow that up with future picks that they get.
It's kind of interesting, too, because I feel like that playstyle leads into part of the reason why Superstars is almost never shut out. Superstars almost always wins against no matter what team in a series. They feels like they manage to get one game, and I feel like it's because they do play around the map and they play so safe, and that strategy almost always will allow your opponent to get enough attempts to where they will make a mistake, and if you capitalize, I would argue it's a lot like Freedom was approaching the last game on Tomb of the Spider Queen. But Greymane and Malfurion here as the rotation for Superstars. Uther was banned, so the high Malf is not that surprising. And it's room deny onto the Sitch's side. I like to see that from Superstars. And also, Icona is pretty good with Malfurion.
Yes, he is. And that is a great deny from Tempo Storm to take that away from Stitches as well as Dahaka as a potential follow-up. June, has he been playing a lot of... He has been playing a fair amount of Malfurion, but Uther is definitely his number one. It's funny to look at the supports of North America because with Tempo Storm being the team that was at the top of the region for so long, everything is compared to June, right?
Yeah.
And June has only played 3 heroes for all of Phase 2 so far. He has been limited on his hero pool based on what they believe is strong for him, significantly strong, and both of those now are gone, Uther and Malfurion.
Yeah, and you know, June also has just been a lot sloppier in his play just overall. At Midseason Brawl, we showed signs of lack of confidence from him in his play, and I felt like that was understandable, even though, again, they have had enough international experience, you should say maybe that should go away. I think it's understandable. There's some big names at tournaments like that, but this is the first time we've seen him take it home. You know, it feels like that lack of confidence is being displayed, specifically with some of the Divine Shields we saw in the last series Tempo Storm play. So I do have my eye out for him in the series and how he's looking, because I think like part of the reason I think Tempo Storm was kind of rose to success was June having blind faith and not knowing better, right? And then we've talked to him. He's learned a lot more. He's grown as a player overall. And suddenly it feels like when he is hindering, so is the rest of the squad too.
That honestly is a common factor when you look at growth, even outside heroes. The more that you learn, the more you realize how much you still have to learn.
Yeah.
And comparing yourself to players with such amazing abilities, such amazing skill, like, for instance, Mary Day, who was at the mid-season brawl, Bakery, who has been in the scene for forever. Just that kind of comparison can start to haunt you.
Yeah.
And now with Malfurion gone and Uther, those are the 2 that he played the most. He played 1 Rhaegar game in all of Phase 2. So do we see that Rhaegar here? Is it going to be a Karzim?
And on the same note, not even to... A lot of people may not know this, but June is actually Korean, speaks fluent Korean, and when he is at events, often hangs out with the Korean players, making that pressure of like that Mary Day comparison, potentially even that much more, because he very much intertwines with those players. It's huge, you know, hangs out every time at events with those guys, and I really can see that kind of pressure being put onto his shoulder, because he very much does temporarily try and adapt that Korean mentality that they have over the strictness and the way to approach the game, at least in just, you know, the off-game moments. There's the Rhaegar, though.
Rhaegar again, and Kael'thas as a follow-up. We know Tempo Storm is always willing to bust out Kael'thas here and there, depending on the battleground and depending on what they have. And with the Stitches, it makes a lot of sense to have that follow-up, especially since Roots and Hammer of Justice won't be available.
Yeah, and there's about no, yeah, like you can't move into the Illidan route. The Arthas has been banned out on the side of Tempo, so who's going to be able to match the Dahaka? The answer is really nobody outside of very unique solo laners, and we already have 2 damage dealers picked by Superstars, so...
Is this the Malthael Dream with Genji and Greymane?
I like the Malthael the most, actually. That's a really good point. Didn't even think about that. If we see the Malthael picked up, I like where Superstars can go with this game. But if we do not see them have a very confident matchup into the Dahaka and then something to enable the DPS like Greymane and Genji to take off, I didn't even think about that. Now that you say that, I'm like, Superstars, you might be able to win this game if we see the Malthael.
It's Yoda's top played here. Actually, no, he has more Dahaka games. But
nice.
The Malthael, let's be honest, let's be real, that's the most hype pick to have for Yoda. Malthael and Johanna.
Man, this is a really nice draft for Superstars. I forgot the Yoda Malthael variable. One of the few teams still breaking out that hero. Whew. And then they have the Genji for the follow-up here. The laning phase, though, Tempo Storm still has an extremely threatening 4-man. They have a rather successful solo. This puts so much pressure onto the Genji in this game. And Superstars is not known as being the most effective, proactive team. And I
think there will be a lot of pressure on all of that format, except Johanna. And Johanna, the pressure comes in of trying to make sure that she can be the one to get hooked, because Genji does have some mobility, so maybe Genji is good too, but there's going to be so much damage, and you know the Gravity Labs follow-up is going to be there, that it's going to be scary for Superstars. And I'm wondering immediately who Srey will play in this match.
Oh, baby. Didn't even think about that one. I saw the Johanna, and I was like, oh, that's Srey, but you're right, that's Urho. So what does that mean for Srey? I'm hoping it's the Greymane. That's the only one that I feel like if we see him on, then I'm like, that is the best odds for it. But I feel like the Genji, I want to see in the hands of Hosty. I definitely want the Malthael to be into the Yoda. So it's like...
Oh, yeah. I think it will be. Yoda does seem to be the side laner of
yeah.
And so in this case, it is going to be Malthael.
It's still... Oh, man.
The fear comes in for Dread, and myself a little bit too, just because Srey is getting used to a new role. And one where he has played warrior role for so long that when on some heroes like Gul'dan, the positioning has not been there yet, just because he's getting used to his new role. So we'll have to see how it works out, but Superstars do have the kind of comp that maybe is able to take out Tempo Storm in Game 1, so let's see if they can do it.
We're kicking it off with the blue side. Tempo Storm is going to stand tall here, moving up to the gates. Don't know if, in fact, I have lower thirds prep for you, so we're going to get this rolling with Caterpillar is our Stitches. We have Fury on Dahaka. Psalm will be on the Kael'thas. Tychus is played by Cawthon, and June on the Rhaegar. Here we go. It's just lag F in real life, you know? That's just how that works, right?
You jumped the gun.
I think I did it backwards, too. First time?
There we go. It's all right. Superstars now. Srey playing Greymane. Genji will be played by Hosty. Malfurion. Wait, that's not. No, Malfurion's played by Iacona.
They're one.
Arrow's playing Johanna. Malthael's played by Yoda.
And
I saw that and I was like, no.
The worst part was I almost said in alphabetical order. But yeah, in alphabetical order, it makes sense. They're really close. I can see that misclick. It, in fact, is Yoda on the Malthael. Oh, man. I was like, man, this is... Talk about roster swaps. Iacona's venturing out into the lone world. Yoda starting his way off on the top lane. 4-man of Tempo Storm. We talked about the intimidation it's going to have. They have the KT as the follow-up onto Stitch's hook. They have Kael'thas for the wave clear. And Rhaegar is pretty good to accent that, too. I mean, just... Tempo's running what was like very meta before before North America started forcing 3-2s. This would be extremely classic there.
Now the 1-1 will be Dahaka versus Malthael, and talking about his talents immediately, I've talked about Yoda and how much he likes Cold Hand, the slow from Soul Rip at level 7 because of his ability to not get kited in team fights, but I think it's almost certain that he gets Touch of Death here because he is up against Dahaka. He can limit the self-healing of Dahaka, and you can see Yoda and his Malthael are a fearsome opponent in the 1v1.
Yeah, it very much is. And pretty much into that 1v1, when you are the Dahaka, you essentially have to, every time Malthael wants to go for a trade, you can't let him touch you and walk away. You have to be able to be comfortable going absolutely blow for blow up until you get the one who collects. You are not going to have the value out of the minions. And once you get that, then you can pop your passive way more frequently, right? But if you do not have that, then you're suddenly going like, well, I can't keep up with him. So it's just not letting him poke and walk away. Always when he touches you, you're like, I'm battling.
And that does put the onus of being able to control one of the shrines on the 4-man of Tempo Storm. They so far have not been able to get bottom, although Rhaegar hanging out in the bottom will get that as June channels it out. But the benefit, too, of getting Touch of Death to be available for the 1v1 is also Rhaegar in Ancestral Healing, trying to limit the amount of healing that comes out of that as well.
Nice dodge of the hook there for Urho. And that is not even dropping the Iron Skin, just confidence there from them. A lot of cooldowns used for Tempo, and Tempo's not, they're winning the early game, but not nearly as hard as I expected. They often, you see Rhaegar is actually the person being the placeholder up on bot, relying on the 3-man to be the minion clear, but that will come back to haunt them as time moves forward.
That's why Urho holding onto the hooks is the best target because he can Iron Skin.
It's just there's almost like, okay, so essentially without moving the Rhaegar into it, it's putting a lot of pressure onto Kael'thas and then the Tychus to be the wave clear. And honestly, we see Scouting Drone was picked up at level 1 for Iacona, so he doesn't accent the wave clear that heavily. I feel like this problem could be a lot worse for Tempo if that talent had changed, but even then, Rhaegar is not acting the 4-man whatsoever, and Tempo should be, like, not even wondering if they can win this. It's like they're cycling and maybe even baiting picks up on top, but Superstars is the team doing that and not losing bottom very hard. So it's a very slow, but early game for Tempo, even though they are winning it, not nearly as hard as they could be. Like, the fact that both of those shrines are even controlled here by Superstars is rather surprising.
Yeah, very impressive into a Stitches Kael'thas.
Yes. And a lot of that has to do with June being the lone ranger. Nice condemn. Srey, though, pretty low in HP. Can he dodge the hook? No, with the last pixel possible, right around that giant cattle. Reels it back in. Finds himself a Greymane.
First blood was there, but I'm a little bit disappointed. Not in the teams, but in you, Dread, because I feel like you had an opportunity for a lone wolf joke and didn't take it.
Yeah, you're right. That's pretty bad. That's I'm gonna have to go back, watch the tape. Go ahead and
unforgivable.
Unforgivable.
Level 7 almost here. Let's see what Malthael picks. Also, Malfurion.
I love this. He's gonna win this trade.
Yeah,
Fury.
he's got Touch of Death now too.
No way. Is he gonna? I feel like Yoda won that 100%, but he backed out. There's the initiation. 5 more seconds. Oh. What Noodle Fight continues.
So Yoda did get Touch of Death, so he's able to reduce healing received by heroes with Reaper's Mark by 50%. I was wondering what we were going to get from Malfurion, but he went with the Hindering Moonfire, so now Moonfire is going to be able to slow targets on the retreat.
Gonna be a really cool level 7. It's actually, I think we've seen it once or twice in North America. Other parts of the world, it's been popping up here and there. I absolutely adore this talent. It's with the Elun's Grace at 4. Suddenly, anybody within Elun's distance is a kill potential. You make your whole comp very Illidan-esque, as long as you're in range of Elun's Grace. And Elun's Grace, for those who don't know, Malfurion's Moonfire range is about 3/4 of a screen whenever you end up getting that talent.
Yeah, it increases the range of all of your basic abilities. Perfect Gravity Lapse is a follow-up. Deflect available, and then Hosty dashes out. And again, there are lots of targets to be able to get away from roots, but can Cattle get away from the body blocks as well as the roots of Iacona? And the answer is no.
The answer is no. Punishment here still coming out from Superstars due to this laning phase. Yoda having a heyday there up on the top lane, and June still the lone wolf. Not as good, you're right. But the lone wolf of bottom.
I'm still proud. 1 kill apiece between Tempo Storm and Superstars.
Tempo is going to lose this Dragon Knight if they stay on these Knights. I don't know. Yeah, Hosi getting away from that shrine, but that was almost... Whenever you lose somebody and you take a Knight, like, that should be a screaming at DK. Superstars not picking up with the Dragon Knight their own because they actually went for a bit of a safer play as well, going into the Knight rotation. Not being able to predict Tempo Storm's movement, but they're still actually winning this early game.
They've been able to get these bruisers in the bottom lane. Tempo Storm transitioning over to getting their Giants in this lane, as well as Dahaka some help, some welcome help in the top lane with those bruisers too. But Malthael is continuing to hold on to that shrine. Just now is the wave pushing up enough where he feels like he can get up there and take the shrine away in the nick of time. So no Dragon Knight yet for either side.
This is another window here for Superstars when they moved in the Giants, and the fact that Tempo has been able to restore the balance back again after losing Cattle and then after
Gorge.
committing to a Knight. Iron Skin's a thing, but you can't walk through walls. Only Leoric really can do that one there. Johanna down.
For 20 seconds, so how can Tempo Storm take advantage of that? They're going to start with invading the Giants of Superstars, recognizing that there are a lot of people off the map, and they will say thank you for these Giants and the added pressure into the bottom lane. Rhaegar starting to get bottom. Top still under Superstars' control, thanks to the Malthael and Genji rotating up to help.
But Tempo's restored the balance in their own favor, again, after that invade, because they have a double camp pressuring on bottom. Suddenly, June's a threat. The interrupt there. Cyber Agility not going to be blocked by that Gravity Lapse, but shout out to Psalm. I've never seen that interaction, the prediction level, but that was a lot closer than I thought it was going to be.
Yeah, he was really trying to go for that after the Drag 2, knowing and understanding, right? Psalm plays a fair amount of Genji, so understanding the escapability of the hero, just not quite getting the kill. But Tempo Storm will get the Dragon Knight, the first Dragon Knight of the game.
You're going to set their focus here on the bottom. Dahaka's got free reign over the Knights on top. He'll be able to clear those up. It's just how much can Tempo Storm make happen. This is enough to be able to pick up a fort.
Do we Odin as well?
Well, if you Odin, it's for the fort on bottom, but typically you split push with the Dragon Knight this early on and pressure it through mid, and then everybody else takes out damage on bottom. And you can see Tempo, they're afraid. Psalm's in the Dragon Knight, but they're afraid to totally split push because they have Dahaka kind of doing his own thing up there. It's just going to be, you want all 30 seconds to be used, and you want all the members to split push. Now Tempo realizes this. They're committing the members up towards mid. It's just too little too late and too much damage on the DK.
Yeah, it's taken over half of the health down.
Gilly, I'm going to be honest. I'm really scared for Tempo Storm. This game hasn't gotten to the point of anything too wild yet, but they're playing uncharacteristically safe for a team like Superstars.
Especially given the fact that Tempo Storm picked the
terrified.
battlegrounds.
I'm terrified right now.
So they came in with a plan. They got heroes, obviously they wanted. They have Stitches, they got that after a noob, so the Warrior choke was under their control. They got choked out of maybe the primary support that they would like. There's a hook.
Malph's there, the root too, and she lives.
The Gravity Lapse caught it too, but it's just trying to take down the damage on somebody like Johanna. And they've gotten some picks here and there, but Tempo Storm, it's been rather slow going. They even got a Dragon Knight.
It just, yeah, man. It just feels like this is the older Tempo where they're trying to restore, you know, play it slow, and eventually they were going to win the game. It feels like we're playing slower than even that for Tempo Storm, right? And against a team like Superstars, that would have been the caliber of team where you would expect Tempo to be a little bit more edgy in their decision making, maybe take a risk they wouldn't have normally, but it's the opposite here. And so, I mean, maybe I'm wrong. They could just be like, they're waiting for the breaking point, they get one fight and their momentum is completely shifted, confidence restored. But how they're playing right now, I feel like Superstars has a realistic chance of winning this game. Not with drags like that.
There's a drag. Ice Block 2. Gorge can come in right after that. But there's a Curse Bullet. Blessed Shield 2. Ancestral Healing connects on Cattle, so he's okay. Twilight Dream follows up as well. But importantly, the team got Iacona out. Iacona lived after being gorged.
He did.
Out of his Ice Block too.
Yeah, every heroic was used there in that fight. and no one went down. The experience still pretty close. About half level separates our two teams. But Tempo, though they didn't get a kill, they won the fight, forcing the members of Superstars back towards Horde, the HP to 50-50. And so now Tempo is trying to use that time to get the invade over the Giants. Malthel and Dahaka are rotating down. Keep in mind, there is no Tormented Souls, but there is a Cursed Bullet. Goes on to Stitches.
Those roots were perfect on top of both Kothenluck and Som. Posty's gonna get pulled in away from the team. Tempo Storm lose Caterpillar.
Yeah, nice split there coming out from Hosty to draw a bit of aggro. Nice timing onto the deflect, ignoring some of the minigun damage coming up from Tychus. And now they got themselves the bottom shrine and Giants moving out through.
I do want to point out that now that 13 was there for Superstars, Gorge, the idea of a Gorge composition got way harder for Tempo Storm 2. Between Inevitable and that we got there with the self-unstoppable for 2 seconds, Johanna, who's had it from the beginning with Iron Skin, and then not even, they don't have Cleanse from Malfurion, of course, but he has his Ice Block, and other people have their own. Look at all of the mobility options of Genji. It's like Greymane. I guess we hope it's Greymane.
The only way that could have gotten worse is if they took Eyes in the Dark. I think that's the only way, because then every single member can become ungorgeable, right? That's a really interesting that you bring that up, but it's a good point. Now with the Inevitable end on Superstars, it's like, well, who do you gorge? Granted, Malph's the answer most of the time.
Yeah, he was able to get it after Ice Block too. So as long as the team can force Ice Block, which they did with Dahaka. So well done there. Then Stitches can step up in the interim there. But even then it didn't work out because Blessed Shield was a factor. They were able to slow down Cattle so he couldn't get behind the wall. It is not, and it's not a composition that's a guaranteed win. That's for sure.
Gilly, we're 12 minutes into this game and we're yet to see a 4 fall. That is just insane. That has managed to be able to make it this far in. Superstars had control over bottom. Their momentum is up towards the top half. Fury is going to see Icona. Gets a little confident. Throws down a drag.
Most of Tempo Storm is in the bottom lane. Now seeing a lot of the members of Superstars up toward the top.
Superstars doesn't have the global. Ooh, gorge down. Thought they could get him past the wall there. That was the only reason you ever gorge in Johanna. Now they baited them. Look at the turn.
Oh, wow.
The Ancestral still lands, though, but look at the anti-healing created there by Yoda. The Ancestral, it lands, but doesn't really when it's about worth nothing.
It lands in a way that keeps him alive, but just barely.
Just barely.
Bottom fort starting to take some damage. Tempo Storm about to get their first fort down. Johanna, in the end, finally fell. Tempo Storm were able to get that pick, but it's cost them both of the shrines.
Man, what we see out of Superstars here, okay, call me crazy, but I actually think Superstars has better odds of winning this game when they lose forts than they do when their forts are alive right now. And I say that because they're just getting out-rotated this whole game. They're just getting beaten slightly into a rotation, getting caught by a gorge here, getting caught by a drag there. I mean, it's just enough things to let those stagger deaths come in. But when it's finally a blow-for-blow team fight that Tempo has to take against them, oh, this is not good.
No, this will be a dead Malfurion.
Yeah, that's kind of feeding into exactly what I'm saying. When they actually have to go full 5-on-5, I think Superstars has much better chances of winning those skirmishes than they do this follow the Tempo Storm around the map.
Yeah, the standard skirmish everywhere.
Yeah, it just, I don't think they're nearly as coordinated as Tempo. So because of that, they are unable to get a true team fight the way they desire. But if the map's opened up, Tempo is going to have a very straightforward way to approach this, typically through the bottom lane like we see. And if Superstars can wait for that, get a full 5-on-5 in the same talent tier, that is where they have a chance to be able to win this game.
Well, with Dahaka, Tempo may just continue to try not to let Superstars get the 5-on-5. And man, Superstars has to slow down these stagger deaths now because that is the third in a row. They lost Johanna, then they lost Malfurion, and now they've lost Greymane. And with a member constantly down, and with the Dragon Knight still up, and with 20 just barely almost here for Tempo Storm are going to try to end the game right now.
They're going to be moving up. Psalm receiving pressure from the Dragon Blade. Ancestral does go down. Yoda getting so much pressure out, but with the shielding on the core, it's already depleted. Psalm's dead. 50-40 Gilly. No matter how many members of Tempo are up, it's not going to matter. They take game number 1 over Superstars.
The Twilight Dream was good there for Iacona, hoping at the end to take them down. But Tempo Storm made sure to end the game as early as they could. They recognized the stagger death situation. It was what, like 3-ish minutes of staggered deaths there at the end where Tempo Storm were able to get the opening needed to win the game.
Not the first time we've seen this out of Superstars. Granted, it's a little bit less clear, right? But it's kind of one of those invisible things that maybe at first glance an untrained eye doesn't see, but that Burrow, Team Freedom was able to provide, and Superstars spent the whole rest of the game not being together. It was essentially staggered deaths is what that was. It has the same effect on the game, except for giving your opponents experience, but it really is the exact same thing. Constantly being behind in rotations, following your opponents, and not being able to restore a balance. There is ways to do that, but Superstars very much doesn't know where that is yet, at least not with the changes they've made. Yeah,
and it's especially rough to deal with. It's rough to deal with on any battleground, but on a battleground like Dragonshire, where you need everybody. You need everybody to be able to take shrines at the right time when your opponents are on other ones, to be able to anchor and watch for where those rotations are coming in, and not being able to have that for that long at the end of the game was really rough for Superstars.
The one thing that still I'm struggling to kind of wrap my brain around here is that Tempo played that game the way that they did, with a kind of slow start, trying to figure things out. Superstars showed signs of life, but then it hits a stage to where they get one staggered death, and they get staggered. I understand that up until the Dragonite, but then they're just like, well, we're going to be able to get the keep through that one more death, and then they just open it up. Like, the game was, what was it, 12, 13, 14 minutes on Dragonshire? But the entire game was so passive from Tempo. I am a bit scared still. Like, Tempo won that, and you would argue the very end staggered death, you'd be like, that's aggressive play right there. But it really was one hook at the worst timing possible was what it came down to. And so I'm not convinced yet here from Tempo that the restoring of their mentality.
What it sounds like what you're saying is that you can see the punishment from Tempo, but maybe not the creation or forcing of mistakes that allows you for the punishment.
Yeah, there's nothing on the side of Tempo Storm in that entire game, it felt like, that was going to force Superstars to make an error. But Superstars did end up making it, and then, yeah, Tempo was there to punish with the staggered death, getting that hook on bottom. I'm really struggling to see that huge shift for Tempo, because they were getting better at punishing. They were doing better with trying to force punishment. But then, again, here today, they started off with very slow game, even though it ended faster than you would assume. Again, there was 12 minutes and not a single fort died. That is very slow.
Well, perhaps it was a drafting issue for them, you know, not being able to have a direct support that could come in and have the follow-up for the roots. Even though they did have Kael'thas, there were some times when even getting the Kael'thas follow-up to wasn't enough to get them the kill, because it was often Johanna who they were hooking. So perhaps it was drafting, perhaps it was map, because it is Dragonshire. We'll have to wait and see in the later games if maybe that was just the one game fluke. And so there was something about that game specifically.
Yeah, I'm just scared after the interview from Psalm. Like, you know, I felt like I can understand, but I felt like it was a little bit too severe. So now it's just going for it. I mean, for all I know, they could be just sitting there with the biggest grins in the world behind their computer screens. But if it's anything like we've seen in the past, and then be rather honest about, that game wasn't the beginning of the, you know, rise of Tempo coming back, I don't feel like, at whatsoever. Because Superstars very much is a team that hopes their opponents are going to give them a mistake, and Tempo's just not going to be able to make one.
Well, Sam, he did sound like, he said that last weekend was really rough. Caterpillar said it when I talked to him for his interview too, and then even on Twitter there were some, after that interview, people talking about Sam looking really sad in that interview, and Fury said last week was just the worst. It does feel like last week may have been even the most defining moment for Tempo Storm, even though we've known them to have trouble at tournaments, have trouble at events, and then be able to bounce back. And there's no doubt they have trust in each other. They're going to bounce back as well too, but it does seem like whatever it was that happened last week is maybe one of the worst things that they've had to overcome together as a team. Game number 2 though, and they've won game number 1. We'll see if Superstars can tie it up.